Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. And today we are just going to get into a little bit of motivational talk and a little bit of breaking down just in general having a life plan, and really just diving into just some of the basics. So it's really just, if you want to call it anything, it's just kind of like an update to a motivational that we've dived into previously inside the channel, about stages in terms of putting your life together. But, discussing with a few friends of mine recently and started getting into some talks about, having battle plans, having a strategy for different points inside your life, especially when it comes to, whether you're starting off at the beginning, or whether you're kind of late in life and you have to make yourself a shorter phased battle plan, but having a battle plan nonetheless for yourself to accomplish the task that you need to accomplish, specifically your goals in terms of financial, in terms of going into, having a retirement plan. And that's essentially what we're kind of looking at here right now in terms of just different ways to go about that, whatever avenue you're going to choose to go about that. And we're not going to dive into every single avenue that exists to accomplish that, but, just kind of briefing on a few things that you can do. And obviously too, when it comes to things like retirement, you having a home at the end where you want to be living, how you want to go about that setup. And so just really starting off, one, you got to have a battle plan for yourself. If you're young and say your 20s, you're probably going to have maybe a 20-year battle plan, or at least that's what you should implement, at least a 20-year battle plan. And I say that because, generally speaking, for those who are young right now, who are 20, maybe even 25, you still have a 20-year battle plan. You want to try to aim to retire or have yourself comfortable as soon as possible. Because one thing we need to understand in life that is not put out there, and I'm going to put this out there, I put it out there on my channel before, I'm going to put it out there again right now. You should not be looking to aim to retire at 65 years old. That's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. It's a concept that's thrown out there that, at least here in the US, and I can't really speak on other places, but here in the US, they kind of promote that out there like as if that's when you're supposed to retire. That's the standard for retiring. It really makes no sense. And you should not think on that basis, because realistically, who's to say you'll even be alive for that long? A lot of people sometimes work their jobs for however many years, and then when it's time to retire, they end up passing away right after they retire. So that in itself makes no sense to say you have to live somewhere between, the way I like to frame things, I like to frame things in blocks of 20 from, 1 years old to 20, 20 to 40, 40 to 60, and 60 to 80 being your lifespan. Anything beyond that, I like to consider a gift. So with that being said, at 65, you're more than 3/4 of your life has already passed. You know what I mean? So to assume that you're going to now retire after 3/4 of your life has passed, and thinking that now, okay, I'm going to just start enjoying myself, it makes no sense. It really doesn't. So with that being said, you got to have a battle plan to make or a battle plan for your exit strategy in life, a battle plan to say, I'm going to finish not during the time they tell me I'm going to finish, but before that. So create a battle plan for yourself. First off, that starts with understanding where you at in life. This is going to also include, if you're older, give this advice to someone else who's in their 20s. So that 20-year-old, because a 20-year-old is not going to know to make a battle plan unless he's told. So pass this advice along to someone else. And if you're 20 and you're watching this, then just listen to this, kind of put it together and kind of make up, a plan for yourself, a battle plan. But if you're 20 or 25 years old, you can have a 20-year battle plan. And in that case, you would crunch your numbers, start saving. I'm not going to go into the details of how you could save. I have that in a past video in regards to money management. You can look that up, but start saving your money, budget everything out, figure out what is your required expenses versus your non-required expenses, and figure out a plan. Put aside a certain amount of money, and try to really crunch down on saving more money than what you might think you need to in a short amount of time. Don't mind holding your breath, so to speak, in terms of, really not having fun for maybe the next like 5 years or whatever the case is. Very minimal if you need to. However long it takes you. Some people might be able to do it in a year. Some people might be able to do it in 5 years. But to get yourself maybe some form of investment that's going to cater to your next stage of life, that retirement stage of life. So, maybe it's buying a house in an investment property. Once again, I suggest, like as I did, you can look up in past videos, but I suggest if you're going to go that route, my philosophy is this: until you are ready to retire, no property that you buy should be for just living in, for comfortable living. It should be an investment property, meaning in large cities, you often need a multifamily home. In smaller cities, you can probably get away with a single family home being an investment where you're able to rent it out and still acquire a decent amount of return income. But nonetheless, and you have to figure that out based on where you live and the demographic of things, and what how much money is brought in for different types of locations and whatnot. That's something you have to do your research on. But nonetheless, the general concept is still the same. Purchase something, save up your money, crunch into a small amount of time on that 20-year plan to buy something soon and early, so that way you can jump on doing it again and doing it again. You want to rinse and repeat if you can. And I'm not saying you have to have like 20 homes, but if you can get something, so you're in that range of like maybe 2 to 3 homes by the time you are finish your 20-year plan, even if they're not all paid off, but they're paying for themselves, then at that point, it helps you get into that phase of being able to retire with whatever you have from your job, but then also, having that on the side too, along with, you can get into investing in stocks, index funds with stock. And, you could do some research on that. I have a little tidbit of that on the channel in some past videos you could look up, which also went into the category of money management. And I did a breakdown into 3 different videos. But with that being said, you can go that route as well for your 20-year plan. But I definitely would suggest going into real estate as well. If you feel you can manage it. If you're not really comfortable with it, try to learn, try to ask anyone who's done it before, because it's really not that hard. It's not as hard as people think. Generally speaking, when you get your first home, you usually have what's known as a FSA loan, if I'm saying that correctly. If not, put it in the comments. And where you're able to put down 3%, but you're going to end up paying a more premium in your monthly amount. But generally speaking, if it's an investment property, it's not going to matter as much, because the intention is that you're making money off of it. So it's not just to live in it and it's a black hole that's absorbing, your resources. It's about you making money. Another aspect of that when it comes to real estate and you investing in property is understanding what is the money value for what you require in terms of how much space you take up. And what I mean by that, or to make it more clear for what I'm trying to get at, is if you're just by yourself and you're single and all you need is the equivalent of a 1-bedroom apartment or a basement. Say if you live in a large city where, or a large city area, within a couple miles of a large city area. So you might need a multifamily. Say if you have a multifamily, you have maybe a 2-family house and you have a basement in it. So I like to call that a 2.5. If all you need is the basement, stay in the basement. Don't occupy a full floor, because now you are occupying a space that that is more valuable in terms of the money you'll bring in versus the space you actually need. So for just hypothetical, say if you're in a big city and you could charge like $2,000 for one of those floors, and then in the basement, you would charge $1,000. Well, if you only need the amount of space of the basement, don't occupy the one of the floors, one of the main units, knowing that you might say, yeah, it's comfortable, it's nice, but you're actually throwing away $1,000 because you don't need that space. And now, if maybe you have a bigger kind of setup where it's not just you, but you have a significant other, maybe even you have kids, you have to say to yourself, is that significant other bringing in income also? Do we have a 2-income family? So that way, us occupying one of the main units is fitting, because we can afford to occupy a $2,000 space because we had double income. If not, then I know it may suck. You're going to have to figure out a way to crunch things down, even if that means that, okay, you're renting out. Say if you have that 2.5 family unit, you're renting out the entire house, but you are staying at renting in a place maybe that's, not as great of a space, but maybe you're paying like, $1,300 for 2 bedrooms, and you got, your kids in a bedroom, and you with your significant other in another room. And in that case, what you're doing now is at maybe $1,300. It may not be as great as staying at your own home, but you're saving $700. And you have to look at it like that, because at the end of the day, when it comes to your retirement plan, it's not about living super comfortably while you're still in the building phase, because that's where people get lost and they don't understand. Your goal is to be that at 40 or 45 years old, maybe even 50, you want to be retired. You don't want to be retiring at 65. Now, with you getting the gist of that for if you're younger, if you're older, and say if you're about 40 years old right now, your plan is going to be a 5-year plan. Now you're going to go into crunch time. Maybe you're 40, maybe 45 years old. And so by 45 or by 50, you want to be retired. You have to go into a 5-year crunch plan. And it's a lot harder than if you had 20 years to go, but also too, you're a lot more wiser and understand there's a lot of things you can live without. First of all, downsize. Downsize if you're living a life that you have too much going on. You have, maybe you're renting and you have more space than you actually need. Downsize. Don't be spending useless money on things you don't need. Get rid of cable TV. You don't need it. Maybe you just have internet and that's it, and you're able to stream things. Do not have a bunch of different monthly bills. You have to consolidate everything down to a small amount to where you are able to afford and pay for the things that you need to pay for. So with that being said, and you're able to save money. So with that being said, you're going to crunch down into a stage where you're able to just maximize all the money you're able to save. And then you're going to put away, and you're going to calculate how long it's going to take for you to get to maybe buying a property as well. Same thing as I just mentioned before, an investment property. And that way you have something for your retirement. But like I said, it has to be, the purpose is for investment property. Why? Because as long as you are still working, you're not retired, everything should be for the goal of making more money, not just simply to live comfortable, because then it just becomes a debt that's taking away from your money rather than giving to your money. And even if you buy a home that you're living in and it's a single family home, people will go, yes, well, you're making equity on the home. But the reality is most of the time you're really not. And I'm going to tell you why. Because unless you are near a big city, which often then requires, a multifamily home, and because the big cities are usually expanding outwards, you're usually making equity because the change around that city, it's like that city starts to grow. And what happens is the neighboring towns and counties around it, because that city starts to explode outwards with, more people populating it because of the jobs and this and that, the neighboring towns start to evolve too. They start to eventually start changing. They get new, what's the word I'm looking for lack of a better word, new structures are being built, new businesses, new residential, all that, because to accommodate the fact that not too many people can stay and exist in that big city. So it has to spread out. And as the demographic starts to expand, you start having those other neighboring towns develop to accommodate that. So with that being said, your property may be in that kind of neighboring town 5 years later from when you bought it, 10 years later. That town now is booming now with a lot more, buildings built up, a lot more residential, a lot more businesses, because it had to accommodate the fact that, everything expands from the big city. Now, in that aspect, what you buy is going to go up in value. But if you bought something in a small town where it's nowhere near really a big town, and it doesn't have that expanding effect where everything from the big city is expanding because your town is too far from that, you're not going to just gain equity. That town is going to be frozen in a standstill, and it's never going to change for even 10 years later. Homes might go up in value a little bit. Maybe if you paid like $200,000 on a home or whatever you paid, but I'm just using that as an example, maybe in 10 years, it might go up, an extra $30,000, $50,000. But for 10 years, that's not a lot, so you're not banking on that. in those places in small towns, the idea is if the home doesn't cost that much, a lot of times some small towns too, in small, areas and states that are very like, away from big cities, sometimes you have houses that might cost like 50, 60, $70,000, $100,000. But nonetheless, sometimes you're able to rent out the property and make a profit of almost like I've heard stories where people make a profit of like say $1,000 a month. So at that point, every year you're making like $12,000 or more in profit. So if you had that property for say a good like 5 years, you made over $50,000, $60,000 in profit. At which point, if you did have to sell the house, you break even and you made that profit over the years, which hopefully you were using that profit money to expand and do other things, whether it's invested in stocks and indexes or whatever it is you had to do, but just don't spend it. So in that case, in small towns, renting your stuff is the answer. So this is why I say in no scenario is just living in it the best option, because if you think you're just going to make it off getting equity, that doesn't always apply. And I've known people who've done that. They bought houses in places that are too far away from a major city, and it doesn't increase in equity. But since they were just living in it, it's not doing anything for them other than being a black hole. And when you're ready to retire and all your finances are good, you can do that because now you can afford it. But if you haven't reached that stage of retirement, it's only stopping you from multiplying your money. I hope that makes sense. So for anyone who's in the 5-year plan, you're going to definitely be looking to buy something for investment purposes. And that's pretty much it. Just like I said, have a battle plan for yourself. Try to put something together. This is very important because a lot of people just sometimes think that retirement life is just automatically there for them. It's not. You have to create retirement life. So you got to make sure you have a battle plan for that. With that being said, you guys stay safe, take care. And if you have any kind of questions and comments, anything you want to say, just put it in the comments below. And if it's a question, I will be sure to get back to you or even make a topic on it at a later point in time. And I'll catch you guys in the next video.